Our devotional is titled Dead Man Walking. Our scripture reading, John chapter 11 and Luke chapter 18. Now, I've given the subtitle for John chapter 11, The Resurrection. Dead men will walk again. Now, Bethany was the hometown of three siblings, Mary, Martha, and Lazarus. And that is the setting of this devotional study in John chapter 11. Now, verse 2 of John 11 reminds us this was the same Mary who anointed Jesus with ointment and wiped his feet with her hair. We'll see that scene a little bit later on. Now, the scene is one of crisis and desperation. For Lazarus, the brother of Mary and Martha, was sick. Now, his sisters Mary and Martha sent for Jesus, and they said, Lord, behold, he whom thou lovest is sick. You see that in verse 3. Now, consider with me then, surely Mary and Martha believed that Jesus would come quickly to their home in Bethany and heal Lazarus, whom they believed was terminally ill. Nevertheless, Jesus expressed with certainty to his disciples, the sickness is not unto death, but for the glory of God, that the Son of God might be glorified thereby. John 11 and verse 4. Now, though the Lord tarried, John 11 and verse 5 assures us Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. And still, Jesus' love did not spare Lazarus of his illness, nor move him to leave with haste to where Lazarus resided in Bethany. Well, 2 days passed, and Jesus suddenly announced to his disciples in John 11 and verse 6, let us go into Judea. Well, the mention of going to Judea raised alarms with the disciples, knowing the village of Bethany was just east of Jerusalem, and the disciples desired to dissuade Jesus from going. They reminded the Lord that his enemies had threatened to stone him in John chapter 10. And then Jesus announced plainly, John 11 and verse 14, Lazarus is dead. And I'm glad for your sakes that I was not there to the intent ye may believe. Nevertheless, let us go unto him. Well, after a day's journey, Jesus and his disciples arrived on the outskirts of Bethany, and we read about 15 furlongs, or about 2 miles away from the city. They were met by some who informed them Lazarus was dead and had been laid in the grave 4 days already. Well, when Martha heard Jesus was close by, she came to him and complained, Lord, if thou hadst been here, my brother had not died. John 11 and verse 21. And nonetheless, Mary expressed her faith that with God's power, Jesus could perform a miracle. And Jesus answered her faith, thy brother shall rise again. Well, in John 11 and verse 24, Martha stated her faith in the resurrection of the last day. However, Jesus encouraged her faith, saying, I am the resurrection and the life. He that believeth on me, though he were dead, yet shall he live. And whosoever liveth and believeth in me shall never die. And then the Lord asked Martha, believest thou this? Well, Martha confessed her faith that Jesus was the Christ, that is the Messiah, the anointed one, the Son of God, in verse 27. Martha rushed back to the house, and finding Mary, whispered, the Master is come and calleth for thee. Well, Mary instantly rushed out of the house and came to Jesus, overcome with sorrow. And through tears she said in John 11 and verse 32, Lord, if thou hadst been here, my brother had not died. Moved by her tears and sorrow, Jesus asked, where have you laid him? And then the scriptures wonderfully and tenderly recorded the shortest verse in the Bible, John 11 and verse 35, Jesus wept. Well, Martha protested when Jesus commanded the removal of the stone that sealed the cave or the tomb where Lazarus was buried. And she said, Lord, by this time he stinketh, for he hath been dead 4 days. And yet Jesus lovingly rebuked Martha in John 11 and verse 40, and he said, I not unto thee that if thou wouldest believe, thou shouldest see the glory of God. And then Jesus lifted up his eyes to heaven. He prayed with a loud voice, Lazarus, come forth. John 11 and verse 43. And miraculously, Lazarus came from the tomb, his hands and his feet bound with grave clothes and his face bound with a napkin. And Jesus said to the people, "Loose him and let him go." Well, in verse 45 through verse 57, now we have what I would describe as an intolerable crisis. Looking back, the Apostle John realized Jesus raising Lazarus after he had been dead 4 days was the zenith of his miracles. And two responses to Lazarus' being raised from the dead are noted in verse 45 and verse 46. The miracle gave cause for many of the Jews to believe that Jesus was the Christ and the Son of God. But for his enemies, the miracle was intolerable, for they determined Jesus must die, or else their power and position among the people would be lost. So Jesus withdrew from Jerusalem. He knew the hearts of his enemies were against him. Only when it was time to present himself as the Passover lamb did he return to Jerusalem and present himself as the Christ, the Son of God. Here's a closing thought for you. You know, God has appointed a day when Christ will return. And on that day we read in 1 Thessalonians 4:16 and verse 17, "The Lord himself shall descend from heaven with a shout, and the dead in Christ shall rise first, and we which are alive and remain shall be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air. And so shall we ever be with the Lord." Maybe today the Lord will come again. Are you ready for his coming?